more than once, made sure things were working exactly right. I used a traceable IP address to send the SMTP. So in the headers, again, it would identify me. It wasn't like I was trying to hide. And again, I used my laptop for that. And I was on the VPN, so they would be able to tie that all back to me. The email itself, I didn't even do HTML. It was all plain text. So the user would see the URL they're clicking on, and that's the URL they went to. Certainly, if you did that, then there's no trickery involved in that. They were going straight for that domain name. I'm not a corporate communications person. I realized that in advance. So I took the bunch of old corporate communications memos, especially the one that they were telling us that they lost our social security numbers, and used that for the language of the email, just rewording a few things so it's really sounded good corporate speak. You also have to consider, if you're doing this, out-of-office bounces. In this particular case, it didn't matter because the email address I was spoofing was a corporate mailbox that is consistently being used and probably constantly being bombarded with out-of-office messages, and I don't think they're really paying attention to that. But if you were to decide to actually spoof an individual in your phishing awareness campaign, they might get bombarded with out-of-office messages, and that would sort of give them a clue, as well as possibly being a denial of service on their mailbox. So don't forget to take that into consideration. On the web server, from a forensics perspective, I wanted to be very clear that I wasn't doing anything tricky. So I did a default Apache install. I had nothing else in the Apache directory systems except the HTML files and the graphic files that were supporting what I was doing. Again, I used my corporate laptop for a server. If you do use your own system as a server and you do get in trouble, the forensics guys might have to take your copy of your hard drive. And so depending on your situation, you could lose your laptop for a few days. After this incident, having a few days of paid vacation that I didn't have to record as vacation wasn't too bad. So that didn't harm me too much. And you need to... I didn't use any scripts except what came because I borrowed the default intranet page and that had some scripts in it already. So I just went ahead and took those scripts, but I didn't add anything, didn't do anything different there. And you also need to make sure your logs are going to be clean or turn off logging. So if you were collecting a password, which I was in this particular case, make sure that doesn't show up in your log files. Otherwise, then it doesn't look like you're innocent. The web page itself, I just stole the intranet logon page. I used a post, no CGI processing, just a simple post. It turned out that when you do the post, and in the Apache logs, I wasn't logging the password that was being submitted. I set it up so that submit and cancel do the same post. So from a logs perspective, there's no way to tell if somebody clicked cancel or somebody clicked submit. There'd be no way to really tell if they fell for it or not. I thought that was important because, again, I didn't want people to get in trouble, and sometimes people go nuts and say, oh, I want to know everyone who fell for it and I'm going to punish them. That's happened in some social engineering tests, and this is sort of a social engineering exercise, and even if it wasn't authorized ahead of time, it doesn't mean management isn't going to come back and do something stupid like that. So I tried to set it up so that you wouldn't be able to figure out who had actually clicked on what link. If you did click submit or cancel, it pops up a page that says, well, this is a social engineering phishing awareness exercise. You shouldn't have clicked on this link. You need to go change your passwords, and a bunch of that kind of educational information. And so I didn't try to actually collect or ask for any personal information. I thought, well, if I got through the intranet logon, that was good enough, and that was beneficial too, because the intranet logon, they can change their password, where if I had asked for personal information, you wouldn't have been able to change that later on. In the source of this document, I put notes in for investigators, so if they happen to look at the source, they'd immediately see, oh, go look at this. It describes how this is being done. They'd know it was an exercise and not a real attack. And then, of course, you got to test it and test it and test it just to make sure that things are going to work exactly as you anticipate. That's a little hard sometimes when you're doing it all by yourself. So what kind of lessons did I learn? One, that there wasn't enough documentation. I thought I had explained things kind of clearly, but when security started investigating, they really weren't getting all the hints that I had left. So I guess I needed more documentation. Unexpected actions create unpredictable responses. I had one person on the security staff who had traced that the web server was running on my laptop. He was instant messaging me and he says, "When I trace this, it says it's on your laptop. Why is that?" "Well, I'm hosting that web server." "Oh, why?" "Because I sent the email." "Oh, that's cool." But there really was very surprising on how many people, even once the evidence started pointing that, one, it was internal, one, that was some kind of exercise and not a real attack, and then it started to look like I was the one that did it, didn't actually believe that this was happening, that I was the one that pulled this off. So also, some way or another, if you do this kind of thing, after the fact, you may want to go ahead and notify security and not just have it done through documentation within the system. That could get you shut down quicker. That's a toss-up there. I don't know, if I was doing it again, I probably still would notify them ahead of time. And make sure whatever you set up is fully patched using the latest versions and everything, because somebody started running web inspect on the web server as this was going on. More lessons, don't give on the principles. I had tested ahead of time and I thought all the connections were going to come through the corporate proxy because this was a domain that wasn't internal. It turned out, and it wasn't consistent, but some IPs were getting redirects from the proxy and then connecting directly to me. So if you had reversed those IP addresses, you would have been able to figure out who had been logged into that IP address at that point in time. Now I knew that you could do that live through DNS, or you could do it in the logs. I knew that if they were going to do it through the logs, there wasn't much I could do at that point. I didn't know that ahead of time. But during the event, a manager contacted me and said, "Give me your logs right now so I can start looking up and see which ones of my people fell for this," because he managed a bunch of security people. And I said, "No." And he said, "You need to send them to me right now." And this went back and forth for a bit. And I continued to refuse to hand it over. I said, "If you need that, you go through the IT security group and have them do forensics and get that all in, you'll get that in due time." And that fortunately was enough of a hurdle that he never went through that effort. I also told him to ask his people. And most of the people, I think, that did fall for it in his group did confess that they fell for it, and unfortunately received his punishment for that. But I think his team was pretty straightforward. That wasn't an interesting thing. I sent it as sort of a test only to about 200 security people within the whole company. I didn't send it to the whole company. I set it all up to send to the whole company and then decided maybe that was a little too much. But there was a lot of people, security people, who totally fell for it. I got a lot of emails from people saying, "Man, that was great, I totally blew that." My favorite one was, "I really liked that password too." So I think the most important thing to take out of this is I tried very hard to set this up so that I was the only one who could potentially be punished, and it nearly became the case that other people could have been punished for this. One manager said, "Well, if they clicked on cancel, they shouldn't have clicked on anything. They should have known that it was a bad website. They shouldn't have gone there to start with. So if they even got there, then they should be punished." And I don't understand that mentality, so I didn't anticipate that kind of thing ahead of time. But apparently that exists. And again, if they're not listening to start with, you're kind of stuck in this situation where either you do